Here's Amazon Kindle again, and I'm reading from Myrtle's Ultimate Mystery in Chapter 4. Started Chapter 4 yesterday, and continue it today. We left off at the top paragraph there, where it says most potentially dangerous was, and let's see, what does that say? Opposition to Pluto of transformation and death in its own sign of Scorpio, and retrograde no less. But even that aspect was enhanced by Jupiter of good luck partnering in conjunction with Pluto. Okay, here we go, continuing. When Ruth, the moon, reached her opposition to Pluto, she would be conjunct the south node of diminishing energy and the open door to the spirit world. That opposition would peak near Valentine's Day, 1996. But since Pluto was pausing to reflect, retrograde, having just turned back the 1st of March, the timing would be off for that aspect. The time could be earlier or later. Maybe Pluto was turning to face Jupiter with that dark gaze of his. No matter, Jupiter would just grin and wink. It had appeared, in that aspect, that Ruth might be within 2 years of her own death. Bet that little tidbit got your attention. Everyone doesn't want to know exactly when they're going to die. If I hadn't known better, looking at that aspect, I might have said, with Pluto in her 5th house and next to Jupiter, that Ruth was toying with death. Did I know better? I hadn't even met the lady yet. Neither have you. All in good time, if we can get to her while she's still alive. I had concluded that her only real dangerous aspect was a square to Mercury. Since natural death comes irrevocably on time, it isn't truly avoidable, at least that's what I thought. I didn't consider it a danger in this particular case. If you're powerless to stop something, what's there to do? In any case, Ruth appeared to be playing with her own impending death, studying it, placing herself in a position opposite it, getting closer and closer to the clarity offered by being in exact opposition to it. Just how would or should I relate those thoughts to Hans? I'm not a politician, but I had to say something. The man was still studying me with those narrowed crystal blue eyes of his. I could only stare into my tea mug so long. Without going into technical detail, there's nothing truly hostile to Ruth in the chart. It merely exposes a problem to solve. If I wasn't careful, this guy would have me telling him everything before I was certain who could handle what truths. As you can see, the problem with doing horary charts is you have to be careful how much you say, when, to whom, and how you word it. You could bring about the tragedy you're trying to prevent. I liked Hans, but charming, straightforward appearing people can be misleading. Besides, I didn't have his chart yet, even though he did show up in the horary as Ruth's guardian. A problem? Hans asked. What problem? Jean piped up. It appears the basic issue relates to some type of conflict between an Aquarian-type, new, faster, freer way of approaching things and an older, Taurus-type, natural, habitual way of relating to life. It could actually boil down to a conflict between technological innovation and natural habit. Interesting. Hans smiled gently. Yes, it rather is, I agreed, blushing in pleasure at Hans's warmth and approval. Well, I know which side Ruth would be on, Jean concluded in disgust. She'd be pro-technology like Rand. What would you say to that, Hans? I wondered. Oh, well, I'd have to agree. Ruth sees the nature of man as indicative of technological development. She believes that without it we are ultimately doomed as a race, and that planetary evolution actually requires the waste products of an industrial age. Jean's face flared red. We're doomed with technology. Hans sipped his tea, studying Jean, frowning slightly. Maybe we shouldn't get into that old argument, Jean. Huh, Jean snorted. Seems to me we've never been out of it. Interesting, I interjected. I thought I was one of a limited few holding that view. I've been theorizing that a new anticipated element will alchemize from the chemical interaction of petroleum byproducts with Earth's natural ecological movement, and that the new element will initiate a necessary phase in our evolution, say for space travel, medical purposes, or as some type of chemical timing balancing agent. Maybe you could call it a necessary New Age cultural nutrient. We could call it an NaCN. Spontaneously laughing at my conclusion, I tried to recollect my more serious facade. I'm just too damned effervescent. Can't be serious for more than a few minutes before I have to laugh at myself or something. A sense of humor is a lifesaver, but an out-of-control one can be downright dangerous, as well as in poor taste. God, Jean groaned. You're as bad as she is. Grinning, Hans concluded, Ruth's gonna like you. I thought. His confident use of present tense means he's definitely not worried about Ruth's disappearance. I wouldn't question him about his slip. Yet sometimes I can be sneaky. At least until whatever I'm holding at bay bubbles to the surface when I'm least expecting it. It's no fun to be contained, controlled, and strategically aware all the time. An exhausting frame of mind to maintain for a Gemini with Mercury combust the Sun and Neptune in Virgo on the ascendant, opposite the Moon in Pisces. Here I am, folks. What I bubble is what you get. Miss Drinkwater, Hans interjected. You used the word anticipated in describing your predicted new element. Could you enlighten me as to just who you think is doing this anticipating? Put on the spot, suddenly noticing we were the last occupants in the restaurant other than the staff, I realized it was time to wrap up this conversation. You might think belief in a supreme creative consciousness would contradict an admiration of Rand's philosophy. However, I have a term for this consciousness. I call it the author of the laws of physics. It is the anticipator, as well as the seeder, of evolutionary process. According to my own personal yet unproven hypotheses. Fascinating, Hans replied quietly, admiration clear in his eyes. I nearly blushed. No, actually, I believe I did blush. Again. But only for an imperceptible instant, because Jean abruptly aborted that train of pleasure. Well, I, for one, think both of you are far too unconcerned about Ruth's absence. Knowing Jean's outburst would stump both Hans and I in the reply category, I decided now would be a good time to exit the scene. I wonder if we might head over to the mansion now. I have to book a motel room after that, and well, I'm feeling it's time to get on out of here. Okay? Sure, of course. Hans stood and moved aside, gesturing my way out of the booth. Actually, if you don't need me at the mansion, I do want to get back to my condo. Jean studied me, frowning, obviously questioning her previous confidence in my attitudes and abilities. Of course, no problem. I'll phone later if I have any news or need anything more from you. Not wanting to make excuses for myself in the charts, I didn't offer reassurance at this point. The only way to prove validity is through successful action and solutions. Words only go so far. And I suppose I'll pause here and continue later. Hope you're enjoying this. I'm enjoying reading it.